I found the note in my living room before I found the courage to admit my marriage had already been discussing me behind my back. It was tucked inside the pocket of Colin Wexler's gray wool coat, folded twice, clean and deliberate, like the person who wrote it expected him to keep it close. I had only reached in because Patricia Wexler, his mother, had asked whether Colin still had her parking ticket from the airport garage, and I was still playing the polite wife who found things, carried things, fixed things, and made everyone comfortable before breakfast. The paper opened in my hand under the soft lamp beside the couch, and the handwriting hit me before the sentence did. Kelsey Rourke had sent thank you cards in that same narrow, tilted script after one of Colin's client dinners, back when I still believed she was just the event coordinator who laughed too long at my husband's jokes. The note had 6 words on it. Let her look unreasonable first. I stood there with Patricia's coat draped over one arm and Colin's coat hanging open in front of me. And for a few seconds, the whole house became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator kick on in the kitchen. I did not scream. I did not wake him. I did not walk upstairs and throw the paper at his chest while his mother slept in our guest room like a woman at a private inn. I took a picture of the note, sent it to my personal email, folded it back exactly the way I found it, and slid it into the same pocket. My hands were steady, which scared me more than shaking would have. Shaking means surprise. Steady means something inside you has finally stopped negotiating. By the time Colin came downstairs in his robe, I had already warmed Patricia's oat milk, poured her half-decaf coffee into the good mug, and placed it beside the sugar dish she liked. He smiled at me like nothing in our house had shifted. Morning. Babe. Everything okay? I looked at him, then at the coat by the door, and lifted my mug before answering. Everything is fine. 3 weeks before I found Kelsey Rourke's note in Colin Wexler's coat, my mother called and tried to make her dizziness sound smaller. Joanne Landry always apologized before needing anything. So when her voice thinned around, I just need a quiet room for a few days. I reached for my keys. I drove down before sunrise, brought her back, and set up the guest room with towels, ginger tea, pills by the lamp, and the blue blanket from my college bed. She touched the edge and smiled like I had given her something expensive, though all I had offered was a room where rest did not need permission. Colin met us at the door with the politeness he used on clients he never invited back. He carried one bag upstairs, then looked around as if my mother had arrived with furniture instead of a pharmacy bag and trembling hand on the railing. How long is she staying? The question came soft, but Joanne heard it because her shoulders pulled inward. Just until she's steady. She won't be in anyone's way. He nodded like he was approving an inconvenience, then opened the kitchen window because the house smelled like medicine and soup. My mother sat under that blue blanket while cold air crossed her ankles. The evening, Colin came home with takeout for 2. 2 containers, 2 forks, 2 fortune cookies, and 1 shrug when I looked. I didn't know if your mom was eating. Joanne lowered her eyes, reaching for the apology inside herself. I gave her my dinner, made toast, and watched Colin eat while the missing meal sat between us louder than any fight. On the 4th day, I found her in the kitchen holding 1 mug with both hands, dizzy and ashamed because she wanted to help. Colin was in the living room, the game covering the faucet. She almost fell. He did not look away. Maybe you should watch her better. My mother asked to go home the next morning. When I argued, she pressed my hand and gave me the sentence I was not ready to keep. Head. Baby. A man does not have to yell to make a house unsafe for your heart. When Patricia Wexler arrived from Connecticut, the house changed before her suitcase cleared the doorway. Colin had driven 40 minutes out of his way for the almond croissants she liked from a bakery near Carrie, and he carried both of her bags upstairs like they contained glass. He adjusted the thermostat before she mentioned being chilly, checked the pillows before she touched the bed, and called down to me. Babe, can you bring Mom the oat milk? She gets dry after flying. I stood in the kitchen holding the carton, remembering my mother coughing under a blanket while he opened a window because soup made the house feel too sick. Patricia kissed both my cheeks and handed me her coat without looking for a hanger. "Sweetheart, you always keep such a pleasant home, even with your schedule." It landed like a compliment, polished enough to pass inspection, sharp enough to leave a mark. At dinner, she picked at the rosemary chicken and told me it was lovely, just a little firm, then smiled at Colin as he cut her serving into smaller pieces. He refilled her water twice, moved the salt closer to her hand, and asked whether the room felt warm enough. My fork stayed still because I had seen those same hands ignore Joanne Landry, gripping one coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. After dinner, Colin leaned back and announced that I had worked hard enough, which almost sounded kind until he gave Patricia a glass of port and guided her to the couch. "Relax, Mom. Brooke and I have it covered." Patricia patted my arm and told me I was lucky to have such a thoughtful husband. 20 minutes later, he stepped into the kitchen where every pan still sat in the sink and lowered his voice. "Can you do this quick? Mom hates hearing the dishwasher when she's trying to unwind." The dishwasher was not broken. The pans were not soaking. Colin had not touched one plate. He stood there with his phone in his hand while Patricia laughed softly at the holiday movie in the living room, wrapped in the same house that had made my mother apologize for breathing too loud. I found Kelsey Rourke again because Colin forgot that confidence makes careless people lazy. His phone lit up on the kitchen island while he was upstairs, helping Patricia choose which sweater looked better for dinner. And I did not touch it at first. I was wiping the counter where his mother's port glass had left a sticky ring. Still hearing the dishwasher, he wanted silent for her comfort. When the screen brightened with Kelsey's name and one sentence that made my stomach go cold, "If she leaves during your mom's visit, people will understand why you were done." I stood there with the dish towel in my hand, staring at those words until the screen went dark. I did not know his password, and I did not need it. The message had already said enough. Kelsey was not waiting in the wings for a marriage to fall apart on its own. She was helping Colin decide where the pieces should land. And more important, who should look guilty when they hit the floor. I took a picture of the lock screen with my own phone, then set his exactly where it had been. My reflection looked back from the dark glass, calm in a way that did not feel like strength yet. It felt like my body had finally understood something my heart kept refusing. Kelsey had been at 3 private dining events with us that year, smiling across candlelit tables, touching Colin's sleeve when she laughed, asking me once whether I was not really the caregiving type. I had thought she was being awkward. Now I understood she had been testing a sentence before handing Colin the cleaner version. When Colin came downstairs, he slipped the phone into his pocket without checking my face. Patricia called from the living room that the room felt a little chilly, and he moved so fast toward the thermostat that I almost laughed. That same man had opened a kitchen window while my mother coughed under a blanket. Evidence does not always arrive as one grand confession. Sometimes it arrives as oat milk warmed for one woman, cold air pushed onto another, and a text from a mistress who knows exactly which wound to press. Kelsey texted again while he stood beside Patricia's chair. "Don't fight her. Let her look harsh." I watched Colin smile at his mother, soft and obedient, and finally understood they were not just waiting for me to break. They were arranging the room so my breaking could be used against me. I called Miles Landry from the upstairs bathroom with the fan running, not because I wanted drama, but because I needed one person to hear the facts in order. I told him about the note in Colin's coat, the lock screen message from Kelsey, the takeout for 2, the open window, and the dishwasher Colin wanted silent for Patricia. Miles did not interrupt me with comfort that would make the truth softer. He only exhaled once and said, "Brooke, save everything. Don't argue with him by text. Don't give him a scene he can sell later." By midnight, I had done exactly that. I emailed the photos to myself, saved Colin's voicemail where he complained that my mood was embarrassing his mother, and packed like a woman leaving a story. Not a house. I took my passport, my work laptop, my medications, the folder for the townhome I owned before Colin, and the framed picture of Joanne and me outside my first apartment. I did not empty drawers to punish him. I did not touch Patricia's room. I only collected the pieces of myself I had been leaving around that house like tips for people who never thanked me. Colin found the suitcase by the front door after breakfast. Patricia stood halfway down the stairs in her cream robe, one hand on the railing, while Colin looked from the suitcase to me as if I had placed something indecent in his hallway. "What is this?" I poured coffee into my travel mug and kept my voice even. "I'm going to Norfolk. I'm staying with my mother. After that, my lawyer can contact you." His face moved through every voice I knew. "Honey, come on. Is this about last night? You're tired. You're being unfair." I looked at him and finally stopped helping him sound reasonable. "You bought dinner for 2 while my mother sat in this house sick. You opened a window while she coughed under a blanket. You asked me to wash dishes quietly so your mother could relax." He glanced toward Patricia, then back at me. "Those are different situations." "They are. You treated one woman like a guest and the other like a problem." When he whispered, "What am I supposed to tell my mother?" I lifted my suitcase. "Tell her your wife went to take care of hers." I drove to Norfolk with my phone face down on the passenger seat because I already knew Colin would try every version of himself before morning. Joanne opened the door in her robe, saw my suitcase, and did not ask me to explain before she pulled me inside. I sat at her kitchen table with my coat still on while she made tea too slowly, still careful with her balance. And that nearly broke me more than anything Colin had done. She placed the mug in front of me and touched my wrist. "You came home." I nodded because if I spoke too soon, I would have become the version of unstable he was waiting to describe. The calls started before the tea cooled. First came the soft voicemail, the one where Colin said Patricia was confused. He was worried, and we needed to talk before this got worse. Then came the second one, lower and tighter, where he said I had embarrassed him in front of his mother and made a private family issue look ugly. I saved both because Miles had told me not to answer. And for once, I let someone protective be right. By evening, Colin's texts had changed shape. "I'm sorry" turned into, "You're overreacting." And "You're overreacting" turned into, "People are going to ask why you walked out." Miles came by after work, still in his navy jacket, and read the messages at Joanne's table without touching my phone for longer than he needed. Don't feed him a quote. Let the timestamps talk. Joanne sat beside me, quiet, one hand around her teacup, and I realized Colin had never asked whether she made it home safely. Not once. The man calling me cold had left 3 voicemails about his mother's embarrassment and none about mine. By the next day, the story they wanted had already started cracking in small, ordinary places. Patricia canceled a lunch back in Connecticut and called it a family situation. A woman from the private dining club messaged me carefully, asking whether Kelsey Rourke had been too involved with Colin lately. I did not post anything. I did not perform grief for an audience. I only saved the message, forwarded it to my lawyer, and watched silence do what pleading never could. The legal separation was not loud, and that disappointed Colin more than anything. He wanted a fight he could describe later with tired eyes and careful words, but all he got was an email from my lawyer and a date to discuss property. I kept the townhome paperwork clean because it had been mine before him, and I did not touch money that was not mine to touch. There was no dramatic emptying of accounts, no midnight revenge, no performance for friends, just documents, timestamps, saved messages, and a woman finally refusing to be edited. Colin asked to meet in person because he needed closure, which sounded almost noble until my lawyer reminded me that closure was not a legal requirement. I agreed to one coffee shop conversation near Miles's office. Public enough to keep his voice polite and short enough to protect mine. He arrived looking exhausted in the way men look when they expect exhaustion to count as accountability. "Brooke, Kelsey was just someone I talked to. You left before we could fix anything." I set the printed note on the table, the one from his coat, and kept my hand flat beside it. "Then why was she helping you decide how I should look when I left?" He stared at the paper like it had betrayed him instead of exposing him. "That's not what it means." I nodded once because the old me would have begged him to explain it until the explanation became fog. The new me did not need fog. It means she knew there was a story. "Colin, it means you both wanted me angry enough to be blamed and quiet enough to be erased." He looked toward the window, and for the first time, there was no client voice waiting behind his teeth. Patricia sent a letter 2 weeks later, long and wounded, telling me marriage required patience and women gave up too easily now. I did not answer. A month after that, after Kelsey's work email surfaced and Colin stopped sounding innocent, Patricia sent a shorter one. She wrote that she had accepted being served without noticing what it cost me. I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and did not rush to forgive anyone just because they had finally found the right words. By spring, I was back in my Richmond apartment, standing over a pot of chicken soup while Joanne sat at my little kitchen table and watched me chop onions without asking whether anyone would complain. The smell filled the room slowly, warm and ordinary, and for the first time in years, ordinary felt like a luxury I had earned. My mother tasted the broth, closed her eyes, and smiled. "You look like yourself again, baby." I stirred the pot because answering too fast would have made me cry into the carrots. Colin did not vanish from the world. Men like him rarely do. He simply lost the clean version of himself he had been trying to keep polished. Friends stopped inviting him as a pair with Kelsey. Patricia stopped telling stories about her son like he was proof she had done everything right. Kelsey moved to a smaller club after enough clients decided they did not want their private dinners handled by a woman who used private rooms to help a married man rehearse his exit. I did not celebrate any of it loudly. I had mornings with no mood to measure before coffee, shelves arranged the way I liked, and a mother who could sit in my kitchen without apologizing for needing a chair. That became the ending I trusted most. Not punishment. Not applause. Just peace. Clean enough to hear myself breathing. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If any part of Brooke's life felt familiar, I hope it reminded you that peace should never cost your self-respect. Share your thoughts below, and may you find the kind of love that feels safe, steady, and honest.